And we're live. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the 2KU Weekly Podcast here in Week 8 of the 2023 season. I'm your host, Type Joy 101, joined as always by Danny V and Pigbear. Today marks about the halfway point of this 2023 season. And so far, we've had plenty of twists and turns, but we're only getting warmed up. The conference race is heating up, and it's going to come down to the wire, most certainly. Let's hand it over to Danny V for our stories of this week.
All right, the first one is Let the Cowbells Ring. Mississippi State upsets number 18 Georgia Tech in overtime, 37-30 in Starkville. Alabama screams Roll Tide in Baton Rouge as they upset number 11 LSU. Also, Curse the number 7 has not come by as Penn State wins in Camp Randall to beat Wisconsin. Next up, Houston beats Louisville 20-13, which might be the last matchup between these two for a while, as Houston's going to the Big 12 and Louisville's going to the Big East. Oregon goes to the Coliseum and beats USC, screaming out to the world, "Are you not entertained?"
Are you not entertained? Speaking of entertainment, we had a great slate of entertaining games in our doubleheader. Pigbear, were you there? Did you check out the streams?
What is it? Repeat yourself. Sorry. Your mic's low.
Did you ever manage to catch the streams last night?
No, I was not. I was at a wedding last night.
All right. Don't forget to check those out on the channel. The VODs are there for you. Well, let's take a look at both of those games. We start with a big matchup in the Big Ten, two of the best teams in the conference. Number 7, Penn State. Number 22, Wisconsin. And Wisconsin was pushing Penn State to the brink. It was a rainy, sloppy game that one team had to scrum out, and Penn State managed to get the win with a go-ahead touchdown on the second possession in overtime to win 30-27. And Penn State has now got back-to-back wins over Michigan and Wisconsin. Is there any doubt in your mind that Penn State is the best team in the Big Ten, Danny?
I think they do. They have a really good resume, and I think they could be one of the best teams in the country. I think they might have a chance to get to the national championship game.
Good catch there, Pigbear.
Penn State obviously had these two back-to-back wins. This is huge for them. Now, momentum's a strong thing. Hopefully they can keep it up and go on and win the national championship.
Now, if we were doing a 4-team playoff, Oklahoma State, Virginia Tech, Penn State, and either Stanford or Oregon would be a very interesting pairing there, but we'll only have to speculate.
No,
Speaking of Oregon, they travel to Los Angeles to take on the Trojans. They've had some recent success beating USC, though it was certainly not easy here. It was very low scoring to begin, and USC had control for the majority of the game, but Oregon clawed their way back, ending up tying the game and sending it to overtime, which would bleed into a double overtime where Oregon would get the final stop and have the last laugh, 38-31 the final. Now Oregon has a huge game on the horizon against their old foe Stanford. Danny, your thoughts?
Yeah, then for Oregon to go into the Coliseum, one of the biggest stadiums in football, one of the loudest ones as well, especially when USC is doing good, it's really impressive for them to win. And let's see if they can continue on this momentum.
Pigbear?
Yeah, again, Oregon, good place to go on the road and win. Heck, maybe watch a potential Rose Bowl matchup, Penn State, Oregon, if either team makes the national championship.
Potentially. That would be a very good matchup, I would suppose. Let's move on now to the slate of games as they happen. Starting in Ann Arbor for one of the best rivalries in college football, though not as prolific as Michigan's other big rivalries like Notre Dame or Ohio State. Definitely the most intense is their battle with Michigan State. The one that Michigan has had the upper hand on for the most part, though reigning Big Ten champion Michigan State wasn't going to make it easy. It remained close for a while, Michigan pulling away late in the game, 26-10 the final, number 15 Michigan picking up a win. Danny?
Yeah, is that you can never really tell how good a team is going to because anything can happen in rivalry. I mean, this game shows that both teams they were competitive, they kept the game close, but Michigan ultimately pulled out.
Pig Bear?
Yeah, I mean, good rivalry up in Michigan. This is the battle for Paul Bunyan.
Just Paul Bunyan's trophy.
Paul Bunyan's trophy, getting mixed up sometimes. But yeah, just good job, Michigan, doing your job, beating the rival Michigan State. Always going to be a rival.
Let's move on here down to SEC country. Number 18, Georgia Tech had been having troubles this season, and the troubles weren't going to get any easier when they faced Mississippi State in Starkville. Another down to the wire game, and our third game so far on this slate to go to overtime. And it was Mississippi State who improves to 6-1, the school's best start in nearly 50 years, as they take down Georgia Tech 37-30 in overtime. Danny, is this Mississippi State team for real?
I think it is for real. I believe that Michigan State,
Mississippi
I believe
State?
that Mississippi State can be well, and I think they are still in the running for the conference title. I believe this will help them win potentially the SEC West, considering they also have wins against Alabama.
Do you have the win over Alabama? Alabama is ineligible for the division title, as we know. They play LSU in week 11, which will shape up to be a very interesting matchup when that rolls around. Pig Bear, your thoughts on this Mississippi State team?
Mississippi State's good. I think they've got a real chance to go to Atlanta and beat a team from Atlanta this week. I think they do their job. They have the big match with LC. We can see them in Atlanta in December.
Speaking of the SEC, we'll stay there heading to Gainesville as Danny will take our Dave Show game of the week. Go ahead.
Yep. Dave Show, coming off that embarrassing loss against UNLV, was going into Gainesville hoping to bounce back. Unfortunately, the Gators had another idea, as the Gators pummeled the Truckers 45-24 in the swamp. Now, Dave Show is stuck on the back end as their schedule is really, really tough. And Florida might have a few other tough games, but it's not looking as daring as Dave Show's.
Certainly so. Florida really shaping up to be a contender in the SEC itself. The Gators currently are in a contentious race for the SEC East. We'll talk about later. They're a one-loss team. They play Georgia in Week 9 in Jacksonville. Both teams as one-loss teams. Potential spot for a stream game. Who knows? We'll figure that out in due time. Pigbear, your thoughts on this game between Florida and Dave Show?
Obviously that horrible loss in Vegas. No, was that Vegas, correct?
Gainesville.
No. Week 4, UNLV. Yeah, I was in Vegas.
Oh yeah, that was.
Yeah, I was in Vegas. But I mean, obviously Gainesville, hard place to play. I did not expect Dave Show to win, but they just kind of looked like they curled up and died for a bit there. You had a 20-point loss. You can't let that happen. Come on, especially to a rival.
This Florida team looks pretty scary if they can do that to a team as competent as Dave Show's been. Let's move on to Baton Rouge for a matchup in the SEC. LSU hosting Alabama, one of the most storied games in SEC West history, of course. And a game that went to overtime saw Alabama walking out with the win on a go-ahead field goal. The Tigers now falling to 4-3 on the year, including 2 ugly losses in conference. On the other hand, for Alabama, I feel like the conference itself is sweating bullets. Alabama is 5-2. And keep in mind, this team cannot play in a bowl game. This team is not eligible for the SEC championship this season due to the scandal from last year. What does the SEC do if Alabama wins this division? Danny?
You just say, all right, you did a thing bad 1 year ago, and screw it, go play in Atlanta. You make us a lot of money.
Danny, your thoughts?
Yeah, that it's really tough to think about this because You would think Alabama would just let teams run over them, but no, they're putting up a fight, and I think are trying to get the SEC to send them to Atlanta, even if they're not going to go into a bowl game. But I'm sure they would still want that Atlanta dream at least.
Alabama could end up at least 9-3. They play Tennessee and Georgia Tech this week, or the next 2 weeks. They have bye week 10 before taking on Tulane, Kentucky, and Auburn to wrap the season. I see them splitting those games, either losing to Tulane or Auburn. But even then, and if they beat Auburn in that stretch, Alabama likely has the tiebreaker and would go to Atlanta if they were allowed, which would lead to either a best case scenario 2-loss Auburn or 2-loss Auburn, a Mississippi State if their cards align, or even worse potentially, a 4-loss Tulane could make the SEC championship game this season if things pan out that way. This is going to be an odd year for the SEC, especially in the West. Let's now move on from that to Yankee Stadium in New York, celebrating the 100th rivalry between Syracuse and Pitt. The Orange and the Panthers meeting where the game was first played in Yankee Stadium in the Bronx. Yankee Stadium, of course, currently the temp home of the St. John's Red Storm while their new stadium is getting built. Now, Syracuse and Pitt still remaining contentious in the SEC, not the SEC, the Big East, in their respective divisions. Pitt got the win here, 27-17. The Pittsburgh Panthers are hot on the tail of West Virginia in the Big East South Division. Currently, they're both tied for the lead. And that backyard brawl could be very decisive this season. Danny, your thoughts?
Yeah, that it was a great game between Sioux and a classic way to remember their traditional rivalry. And for Pitt, I'm sure they must be happy to get the game with the win because, as you said before, they're tied with their arch rival, and the backyard brawl might be a really contentious game.
Pig Bear?
Yeah, obviously cool because, the Bronx, SEC country. I'm kidding.
Mm-hmm.
No. But, Pitt, Syracuse, good rivalry, good thing. You ought to see him play in New York. That was pretty cool. But, Pitt, that backyard brawl is going to be a lot.
Yankee Stadium.
Not just...
Danny?
Yeah. Yankee Stadium, Bronx, correct?
This was in the Bronx?
Yeah. So, Bronx, SEC country, because the whole SEC comment, but I'm kidding. But the backyard brawl is going to be a pretty heavy game, much more than it contains every year, but still going to contain a lot. I'm not going to go on two prediction here, but I think West Virginia rolls. They don't like Pitt, and I think they're hedging for Pitt. Rolls over, and they're trying to get that Big East championship game.
I don't think that's too far off. The Pitt Panthers already had their bye in week 5, so they'll close out with a gauntlet. That doesn't seem that difficult entering the West Virginia game. The Mountaineers' path seems a little more treacherous with Syracuse and Boston College still on their schedule, as even aside from Pitt. So maybe Pitt does get help from other teams, and they get the chance to take the conference in that way. Hey, though I wouldn't sleep on Rutgers. The Panthers and Scarlet Knights meet each other in week 8 this season. But I think Pittsburgh is a sleeper team to win the SEC outright. Let's take a look now at our next game on the slate. Actually, before then, Yankee Stadium will be busy next season. They'll be hosting not only the Red Flash again, or the Red Storm again, but also a game between Army and Notre Dame at Yankee Stadium in 2024.
That would be cool.
Now we move on to Conference USA action. The final time in conference these two teams will meet for the foreseeable future. Houston and Louisville were founding members of the CUSA back in 1996. However, the Houston Cougars announced their leave for the Big 12, as well as Louisville leaving for the Big East Conference. And we'd have to wait until some postseason shenanigans to see these teams playing again the regular season. Louisville was ranked number 20 entering this matchup in H-Town, and the Cougars decided to leave them something to remember them by knocking them off 20-13 at home. The Houston, sorry, I forgot the nickname. The Houston Cougars leave this rivalry with a win. Danny?
Yeah, that these teams are really, really good in both their divisions. I believe that both these teams well disdain for each other. I wonder if both these teams will schedule a home and home maybe at some point soon.
That might be in the future. Remember to check our headline schedule. Maybe Danny will post some stuff about that. Pigger, your thoughts on this game?
Always hate to see games come to an end because conference realignment. I really don't like it. I like it, but I don't like it. I like it. Stuff starting to make more sense. I don't like these cool games you lose in conference realignment. But yeah, just good job to Houston sending them off, saying you're right. That's cute. Go Cougs.
All right. We could see these two teams meet up. I believe the Big East and Big 12 will have a bowl berth. Will have bowl berths next against each other. They already have the Liberty Bowl, but potentially they might have another in the future. In the future, obviously, these two teams are expected to have a lot more success into the future. So who knows? Maybe they will meet each other some other time, some other place. All we know is Houston will gloat about this win for years. Let's wrap this score thing up with a game out west in Albuquerque. The New Mexico Lobos have had an incredible run this season, but they ended up meeting a crash course with reality as BYU helps them come back down to earth. 19-7, the final score in this one. The BYU Cougars get the win. That's correct, right? Sorry, I forgot the nickname again.
BYU won.
Huh.
BYU Cougars.
Yes, I wanted to make sure. So how do you think New Mexico is feeling with this reality check, Danny?
I'm sure they might be hurt because they were going to the game undefeated, maybe having hopes, maybe potentially getting to Denver for the Mountain West Championship. And, I think it was also their homecoming game, so I'm sure they must be feeling doubly hurt, but at least they're going to the bye, and they only have two more really, like 2 to 3 more really tough games left. So bowling, at least they're still going bowling, at least.
That's certainly something they can hold their head up. That was a huge improvement over last season. I don't think New Mexico is out of the race yet. They have a really tough game. Oh, no, never mind. They do have a lot of tough games. You are correct. They end with TCU,
TCU,
New Mexico
go
State.
to New Mexico State, and home against Boise.
And a home game against Boise. Well, it was fun while it lasted. Hey, Pig Bear?
Mr. White, we lost, Mr. White. I'll stop. Yeah, that sucks for New Mexico. Now, here's where you go on the bye. If I'm New Mexico's coach, here's what I'm saying. You got to lock in. If you want to go to Denver, you got to win out, essentially. Survive in advance.
That's going to be a tall order with some of the competition on their schedule moving forward. Or how about BYU as well? They are now... This was a team we didn't have a lot of high expectations for this season. They're now 5-1 after rallying off 4 straight, the loss to TCU, and now picking up a win against New Mexico. BYU's schedule is not much easier either. They get Utah State, Boise State, San Diego State, and Utah still on their schedule. Who knows? Maybe they have a great run moving forward. And that'll wrap up our scores. Let's now take a look at the top 25 for this week. We have a lot of shakeups at the bottom of on the bottom of this ladder. At the top, though, there's some change for once. Not major, but we do see some teams flipping places. Oklahoma State and Virginia Tech still your 1-2. Stanford is now number 3, bumping up over Boise State, who now falls to 4. Oregon is now into your top 5, sitting at that 5 spot. Up a spot is Penn State, now to 6. Sitting at 7 and 8, TCU and Baylor fall 2 spots to make room for the incoming Oregon and Penn State. Georgia and UCF fall one spot as well to wrap out your top 10. Clemson is up a spot after LSU's loss, now to 11. And number 12 is Utah, who jumped a spot. 2 spots jumping up is Michigan at 13. Number 14, Auburn, actually stays put as teams jump ahead of them. Number 15, now Florida, who goes up 1 spot. And falling 5 is LSU to complete a 3-team stretch in the top 25 from 14 to 16. Number 17, Boston College is up 2 spots. And our biggest jumper this week is actually Nebraska, who jumps 7 spots to number 18. The Cornhuskers have had a quietly good season this year. Not a lot. We haven't given them a lot of love. Maybe we will in the future. But it seems like they're finally picking up some steam in the rankings. Number 19, USC, falls 2 spots. And now we get to our debuts already. At number 20, UTSA, for the first time in school history, enters the top 25. The Roadrunners are currently undefeated and have already clinched a bowl berth this season. They're looking to be one of the best teams in the WAC. They'll meet up with New Mexico State in week 11 this season for bragging rights in the division. At number 21, Appalachian State out of the SoCon, also undefeated, looking very much like the world beater of the Southern Conference. I believe they were ranked back in 2022 at one point. Correct me if I'm wrong. But
yes, I believe they were.
They were there for a bit, but I believe they fell out with the loss to William and Mary. They still have to watch out because games against Old Dominion and even Georgia Southern could still be trouble later in that schedule. Returning to the top 25, and number 22 is Cincinnati, which was a surprise to me. Number 23, Mississippi State, for the first time since 2001, have entered the top 25. The Bulldogs are 6-1, having an incredible start to the year. At number 24, we had Stephen F. Austin rising up the ranks last season out of the Southland Conference. This year, it's their rival Sam Houston making their appearance in the top 25. Number 24, this is their last season as a Southland member before in 2024 they head to the WAC. And at number 25, still remaining ranked, but only barely, is Wisconsin, falling 3 spots after their overtime loss to Penn State at home. The other teams hovering around the voting marks, we have 5 teams leaving the top 25. Georgia Tech is out after their loss to Mississippi State. Louisville leaves with a loss to Houston. Coastal Carolina is out of the top 25 after they lost to South Alabama over the weekdays. Colorado is out after the loss to... I actually don't remember who they lost to this week. I believe it was Kansas State. And Arizona State is out after a loss to UCLA. Other teams receiving votes this week: Indiana, Kansas State, Duke, BYU, Pitt, Georgia Tech, Louisville, Jacksonville State, Alabama, Old Dominion, Coastal Carolina, San Diego State, and New Mexico State. You have any thoughts on these top 25 teams, Danny?
Yeah, we have a lot of big shapes and a lot of new welcomes. Like, welcome to the team, Sam Houston, UTSA, Mississippi State, and App State. Welcome to the party. Spread State, Colorado losing to Missouri, and then them just on the 3 and loses me. That's really shocking to me. But I think the team that might be the most overrated might be LSU potentially, because they're 4-3 as of now. But we gotta see how that turns out for them.
Pigbear, your thoughts on the top 25?
Roll damn nears. What else? If I'm Auburn or in Penn State, I'm a little disrespected. You've had these teams jump over you. I take that as inspiration. And heck, both teams fire off the mouth. Both these teams still have a shot at national championship. Both these have 1 loss, correct?
Penn State is undefeated. Auburn is,
And
I believe,
Oregon has 1 loss. And why? Again, Penn State's got to be mad about this. So
that Oregon team is also very good. They do have 1 loss against Oklahoma State still lingering, so that might be a sign for Penn State to be miffed about it. I'm going to hand it off to Danny V here as he talks about the teams now bowl eligible this season. Go ahead.
All right. We got some new teams joining the bowl party. We have Baylor, who joins us 6-0, Cincinnati, Clemson, Florida, Georgia, Jacksonville State, Mississippi State, Nebraska, Old Dominion, Oregon, Sam Houston, South Dakota State. Welcome, welcome, Rabbits. SMU and TCU, we got the Iron Skillet duo, and UTSA to round out next teams up.
Interesting.
Next up, we got the teams who are knocking right outside of bowl contention, which means they're at 5 wins. First up, we got Akron. They are currently at 5 wins. They are going this week. They're on their bye week, but after that, they're playing at home against Buffalo. Next up, we have Army, where this week they're playing in the Commander-in-Chief game, playing at home against Air Force. Next up, we got Arizona State, still outside after their loss against UCLA, but they're entering to their bye week, and then they'll go to Cal. We have Auburn, who will be playing at home against LSU. We have Boston College going on the road to UConn. Next up, we have BYU playing at home against Utah State for the... What's the trophy name again?
The Beehive Boot, it is.
Yep, the Beehive Boot.
It's a three-way rivalry with Utah.
Next up, we have Coastal Carolina dropping way outside the top 25. They're entering to their much-needed bye week, and they'll be playing at home against Middle Tennessee State. Next up, we have Duke. Welcome to the table, Blue Devils, especially after last year's
Disaster.
They're going on the road to Clemson, a really tough environment. Let's see if they could maybe try getting to bowl contention. Next up, we have FAU, who will be entering their bye week this week, but they'll be playing at home against Western Kentucky the week after. Next up, we have the Cougars of Houston, which they will be playing at home against Southern Miss. Next up, we have Indiana, who will be going on the road to a really tough place, Happy Valley, to play against the Penn State and the New Lions. Next up, we have Iowa going on the road to Purdue. We have Penn State, who will be entering their bye week, but then they will travel on the road to Toledo. Next up, we have Liberty, who, for this week, they're going to be hosting their biggest home game in program history, as they welcome in the Louisville Cardinals. Speaking of the Cardinals, the Louisville Cardinals are also knocking around outside at 5 wins. So whoever wins this game, good attention. Next up, we have Michigan, who will be entering their bye week this week, but afterward they'll be playing at home against Northwestern for a little trophy game, a brand new rivalry they have. Next up, we have New Mexico State. We're playing at home against Nevada. Next up, we have the Irish of Notre Dame, who will be entering their bye week. After that, they'll be hosting the Wisconsin Badgers. Next up, we have San Diego State, who will be playing in a bye week this week, but then they'll be hosting TCU. Horned Frogs will be going to San Diego. Next up, we have South Alabama, who will be going on the road to Louisiana. A Louisiana team who has deeply disappointed, but they always have a little bit of a tricky team. Next up, we have Southern Illinois, who will be playing at home against new to the Missouri Valley, Southern Utah. Next up, we have Texas State going to their bye week, but they'll be playing at home against Colin Payton. We have West Virginia going on the road to Georgetown. Next up, we have Wisconsin, who will be entering their bye week, but will also go on the road to Notre Dame. And last but certainly not least, William & Mary, who will be entering their bye week and going to VMI the week after.
Thanks for that, Danny. Who do you think, out of all these teams, have the easiest and hardest routes to making the bowls next week?
I believe the easiest team would have to be Houston. They're playing against a really bad Southern Miss team. They only have 1 win this week, so I'm sure Houston will be happy to take this easy win to get the bowl. And for the toughest game going to this week, I would have to say would probably be going on is either Duke or Indiana, because they're both going on the road to top environments. They'll loud, they'll be energetic, they'll be bursting with joy, but let's see how these teams do.
It's going to be a very interesting story. I like that Liberty-Louisville matchup. The Liberty Flames not only playing for their first bowl eligibility, or playing for bowl eligibility this season. This will be their first bowl berth in program history if they made it this year and beat the Cardinals. They still have plenty of opportunities to do so, but they're still in contention in the Conference USA. A very interesting race. We'll now move on to the conference races. I'll check the Heisman Watch in a after that. Let's take a look at these conferences. I feel like later on we're going to end up having the game have on our outline sheet what each team needs to do to make the conference championship game. But that's still for a little whiles away. As we look at the ACC to start us off, the current favorite Virginia Tech is cruising at 6-0. Clemson is right behind them, but now a new challenger approaches in Duke. Duke, with a win, would put themselves in the second spot, and potentially, if they keep winning at least through North Carolina, lock themselves into the conference championship game. This would be the first time the Blue Devils ever played in the ACC title game. Not much else is in the conference to really keep competing. A potential run could be made by a team like Maryland or Virginia, but it's not likely at this point in the season. Moving on to the American, Jacksonville State clinched the first bowl berth in American history. American Conference, not the country of America. We've had a couple of those before. Jacksonville State is 6-0, tied with Charlotte for the best record in conference. The 49ers were off last week. They play Kennesaw State this week in one of the more high-profile games this conference has to offer. The 49ers and Gamecocks meet each other in Week 11. The Big East Conference, Boston College in control of the North, sitting at 5-1, 4-0 in conference. Syracuse is 3-1 in conference, 4-3 overall in second. UConn is also in the running at 3-3. The Big East South is now Pittsburgh and West Virginia's division to win. They're both tied for the lead. Pitt plays Rutgers this week, who are sitting in third place and would leapfrog the Panthers with a win. And of course, the big matchup, if Pitt wins that, would shift all the way to Week 13, as the backyard brawl would decide who goes to the conference championship game. Now to the Big Ten. Top two teams make a conference championship, and right now those top two teams look like they're playing this week. Penn State, undefeated on the year. Indiana with one loss out of conference to LSU. A big game in Happy Valley. Should the Hoosiers lose, Notre Dame could hop into second place with a win over Wisconsin. Wisconsin themselves would hop into second with an Indiana loss and their own win. Both teams are 5-2 with one loss in conference. Michigan is still lingering in the conference race. Even Purdue is within eyesight of the division. Iowa is running as well. They would need a lot to go their way to make the conference championship in that case. On to the Big 12. Oklahoma State still the clear favorite. Baylor in second. Texas Tech is undefeated in conference, though 4-2 overall. Nebraska is 6-1 and 3-1 overall. The Cornhuskers have the easiest schedule moving forward. Their toughest game is likely a road matchup against Colorado. But even then, I think the Cornhuskers could make a run, and potentially with some luck and an upset or two, nab away Baylor's second place spot. The one team that Cornhuskers lost to was Baylor in Week 4. As for the rest of the conference, not a lot still in competition. Kansas State is lingering, though so is Colorado. Hello to whoever joined. We're in the middle of a call. I had to mute you because we're in the middle of the stream right now. Moving on to the Conference USA. In the lead in Conference USA East is UCF, who is 6-0, 3-0 in conference play. Liberty is now second with 3-1 record in CUSA play. Liberty is 5-1 overall. Cincinnati is 6-1 and 2-1. Louisville 5-2 and 2-2 in conference play. In the CUSA West, SMU is in the lead at 6-1, 4-0 in conference. Houston is in second, 5-2, 3-0. The Houston Cougars' two losses were to Utah and TCU. Though that's one thing they do share in common with the Mustangs, both of their only losses came to TCU. Houston and SMU meet in Dallas in Week 11. The Independents Let's get a quick glance. Army is 5-1. They were off this week. They play Air Force in their next matchup to potentially reach bowl eligibility. Obviously, no conference to talk about here. The only other team still in arm shots of bowl games are Colgate at 3-3 and Dave Show at 3-4. The Ivy League is about what we expect from the Ivy League. 3 teams are currently tied with the best record, all 3-3, with 1 win in conference each: Columbia, Cornell, and Harvard. Also 3-3, but with a loss in conference, is Dartmouth. Their only conference game coming last week to Princeton. So the top 3 teams, or the top 2 teams likely would be Columbia and Harvard. They meet each other once again in week 11. Into the MAC we go. Akron suffered a loss to Miami of Ohio this week. They're off on bye, which means Miami, Ohio technically holds the division lead and will keep holding it into next week. Though it's likely that Akron could win out, and Miami, Ohio has a tough road game against Northern Illinois they still have to worry about. The Redhawks, though, are the current favorites to win the division. Kent State is not far behind either. They're 5-2, 2-1 in conference. Currently tied with Akron, who they end their season against. Into the big whatever the West is. Toledo is in the lead at 2-0 in conference. Now 2-1 in conference and 4-3 overall is Central Michigan. Northern Illinois, the perennial top team in the MAC, though, has fallen to 1-1 in conference and 4-2 overall. They have a game against Miami, Ohio, and Central Michigan still to go, and a revenge game for Eastern Michigan. This division is surprisingly wide open. Same can't be said for the Missouri Valley. Though Chicago has had a great run so far, they're 3-0 in conference and 4-2 overall. The Chicago Maroons still play South Dakota, Southern Illinois, and Wichita State on their schedule. Speaking of the Salukis, they are 5-1 on the year. Out of their bye, they'll clinch bowl eligibility with a win over Southern Utah this week. And they're likely to be your favorites to win the conference, or at least the division, outright. As for the West, it is once again the Dakota show. South Dakota State is 6-1. Surprised that this team was the one to take it, but someone had to fill the gap. North Dakota State now 1-2 in conference. They're 4-3 overall. South Dakota 1-5 on the year, but they are 1-1 in conference. Wichita State 2-1 and 3-3 overall. The Mountain West is still very interesting. Utah and Boise State are the top 2 teams, 7-6-0 respectively, 3-2-0 respectively in conference. New Mexico with the loss falls out of the first place spot, but they still can win it. They would need to beat Boise State. They would need to beat Boise State and hope that either TCU or Utah loses to clinch themselves a spot. Looking TCU themselves, the one-loss team, they're still in contention for the conference, but they need another Utah or Boise State loss to seal a spot. Week 12 is when Boise State and TCU play each other. Looking forward for everyone else, San Diego State 5-2 at 2-2. BYU now 5-1 at 1-1 in conference. 1-1 in conference at 4-2 is Utah State, who could linger and clinch a berth if all things go their way. Enter the Pac-10. And once again, it's a Stanford and Oregon top 2, the most successful teams of the past 15 years in the conference. The Stanford Cardinal are 7-0 and 4-0, and Oregon Ducks are right behind them at 6-1 and 4-0. Arizona State is 3-1 in conference and 5-2 overall. USC falling to 2-2 in conference play and 4-2 overall after their loss in double overtime to Oregon. Washington State is 3-2. UCLA now improving to 4-3. Arizona State, I already mentioned, was 5-2. Washington State is still there, but they need a miracle of their own. Oh, speaking of miracles, Washington would need one to become bowl eligible. Into the SEC, we already mentioned the tight race At the top, Florida and Georgia, 2 one-loss teams, both at 6-1 overall, and the only thing separating them is Florida's loss to Vanderbilt, putting them behind on tiebreakers. Georgia's loss came out of conference, so they have the edge. They play each other in Week 9 in Jacksonville to decide who holds the lead in the division. Georgia Tech, technically not out of it. They are 1-2, but they would need Georgia to lose again, which may happen if they fall to Auburn in Week 10. The Bulldogs also play Mississippi State on their schedule, and, of course, the matchup against Georgia Tech at the end of the year. The rest of the division is not really within earshot of the title, though Vanderbilt could put up a valiant effort. They play Georgia Tech this week, as well as some tough games against Georgia and Auburn after their Week 10 bye. Into the West, it's Auburn's division currently to lose. The Tigers control their own destiny. They were off this week. They play LSU in Week 8, as well as a Week 10 matchup against Georgia and a Week 13 matchup against Alabama, who is 5-2, and even though ineligible, could still win the top spot if things go their way. Mississippi State, though, is in second. Currently in second place at 6-1 and 2-1 in conference. They play Kentucky this week, as well. After their Week 9 bye, they have Tulane, LSU, and Georgia to worry about in a 3-game stretch. Speaking of the Green Wave, they're not out of this. Even at 4-3, they could still pull a run. They have Mississippi State, Alabama, and LSU remaining on their schedule. But they already lost to Auburn. And given some help from Georgia or Alabama, the Green Wave could realistically make the SEC championship game. As for LSU themselves, they are now 4-3 and are in a shocking turn, now needing outside help to make the SEC title game. Moving on to the SoCon now. Currently in the lead in the SoCon North Division is Old Dominion. The Monarchs are 6-0 and 4-0 in conference. 2-1 teams make up the second spot, both 5-4-2 respectively. William & Mary and James Madison. The Dukes have a pretty big game in Week 8 against Appalachian State that they would need to win in order to keep pace with Old Dominion, who has the tiebreaker in conference with that 2-overtime win in Week 1. William & Mary, of course, still in the running as well. They play Old Dominion in Week 11. Moving on to the South, Appalachian State in control at 7-0, 3-0 in conference. They play James Madison on the road in Week 8. Remember, road games against top teams in the other division, while you are in the top 25, is Appalachian State's kryptonite. The same thing happened to them last year against William & Mary, so they'd have to be careful. They play Georgia Southern as well in Week 12. The Eagles are in must-win territory at 3-3 and 2-1 in conference, though they have a relatively easy stretch moving forward. Western Carolina is still a long shot chance of winning the division as well. Into the Southland, in the North, with an upset win, Central Arkansas beat Stephen F. Austin in order to clinch the top spot. At 2-4 and 2-0 in conference, the Central Arkansas Bears are performing well in their second season as an FBS member, though Stephen F. Austin still projected to win the division in the running as well as Southeastern Louisiana, and who play Stephen F. Austin in Week 10. Into the Southland West, Sam Houston is in complete control. Currently 2-0 in conference play, 6-0 overall. They play the number 2 team, Abilene Christian, who is 3-3 overall and 2-0 in conference in Week 10. Into the Sun Belt we go. Coastal Carolina losing their last 2 definitely hurts them, but they're still only 3-1 in conference play. And now FAU is hot on their tail. They're now tied for the lead in the conference, or in the division rather. They play each other in Week 11. Looking at the West, Both of the top teams have had troubles lately. 2 losses for Arkansas State back-to-back, bump them down to 4-2. South Alabama has had 2 losses, only one of them being in conference to FAU. And what that means now is the current leader in conference is 3-4 Troy. In division, at least, is 3-4 Troy. All 3 of their wins have come in conference against Western Kentucky, Arkansas State, and FIU. They play North Texas this week. The Mean Green are still very much in the hunt. And it seems preposterous to say this, I think so is Louisiana. The Raging Cajuns are 1-5 so far and 1-1 in conference, but they have a pretty easy schedule moving forward. Their toughest game is this week against South Alabama, but it's at home, as is their matchup against North Texas. This is going to be a very interesting division moving forward, especially with all these fringe teams. We now move on to our final conference in this discussion, the WAC. Out of the WAC Mountain Division, the current favorites are UTSA and New Mexico State. They meet up for a Week 11 matchup. New Mexico State sitting on top of the division at 5-1 and 3-0 overall, or 3-0 in conference. UTSA is 2-0 in conference and 6-0 overall. Oh, as for any tougher games they have coming up, New Mexico State plays New Mexico, but that is not a conference matchup, so it won't matter for the championship race. UTSA's toughest other matchup will be their final game of the season at home against a Texas State team who is very much still on the table. The Bobcats are 5-2 and 2-1 in conference. And we wrap with the WAC Pacific. San Jose State holds on to the lead at 5-2. They're 2-1 overall in a very stacked division. Nevada has 4 wins. Fresno State, CSU Fullerton, Hawaii is 3-3. Pacific has 4 wins as well. This is a very good, very strong division. You like to see something like this. Though I think that some of the best teams will definitely filter their way out as we move forward. The current favorites look to be teams like San Jose State, Fresno State, or Hawaii. Well, that was a lot. I'll take a quick breather. Danny, what is the best conference race we're looking at so far?
I feel like the most competitive one might be the Big Ten, as you saw. Almost half the division is still, or half the conference is still in the race. I believe that they could all cause a lot of chaos, and there could be a lot of mayhem going into it.
Pig Bear?
Give me the ACC for chaos. He's still got Clemson and Virginia Tech, 2 front runners, but heck, Duke can cause some stuff, and neighbor Virginia or Maryland can get high and cause some noise.
All right, let's now move on to our Week 7 discussions. We have a couple games for your viewing, for your pleasure. Don't forget to hop on the Type of Joy 101 Discord to see all of these scores updated live every Saturday. We're going to start off with our first matchup on Friday, a big game in the American Athletic Conference as Kennesaw State, who is 3-3, taking on 4-2 Charlotte. This will be a big test for Charlotte entering that Jacksonville State game, and a game they'll need to win in order to stay on pace. Kennesaw State as well will need to win this game to stay in the running for the first ever American Athletic Conference championship. The points favor Charlotte by 4.5 here. I'm going to take the Niners as well. Danny, what do you have?
Yeah, give me the Niners as well. I believe Charlotte should easily beat Kennesaw, and that Kennesaw might be having this a little bit of a rough year transition to the FBS, but I do think that they should be able to win this.
Pig Bear?
Give me UNC Charlotte winning this one. So, again, Kennesaw State's just struggling. The 49ers, they're here, if they want to have a chance to win the American, they've got to win these small games.
All right, let me now move on to our Saturday slate. Number 17, Boston College, 5-1 and 4-0, the only ranked Big East team at this point. They'll be taking on UConn on the road. The Huskies, a bit of a ways off from their 12-1 season, or 12-0 regular season last year. The Huskies are 3-3. with a 2-1 record in conference. Vegas favors the Eagles by 7. I will agree with them on that. Danny, your thoughts?
Yeah, that I do think Boston College should win this. Hasn't been a good year for UConn, but I think Boston College should easily win this. But UConn will give it a fight.
Big Bear?
Yeah, give me Boston College winning this one. Safe choice.
All right, let's move on now to a Big 12 matchup. Number 1, Oklahoma State. Just got a win this week over, I forget who it was. I believe
Oklahoma State beat Kansas.
it was Kansas. That's correct. Oklahoma State got the win over Kansas. They're now. I don't think their conference record is correct. I don't think they're 6-0 in conference. They're 7-0 overall though, as they take on Texas, who's 3-3 and 1-1 in conference. Texas had a big win over LSU. They know how to keep it close with big teams. Though the points favor the Cowboys by 15, I'm gonna have to take them there. Danny, your thoughts?
Yeah, give me the Cowboys to win this, but I do think Texas keeps it close. Austin's been a tough place to play at. It's been really hard for teams to win there. And, well, Texas could sometimes pull out a little shocker. Just ask LSU and Oklahoma about that.
Pig Bear?
You call it, sorry. Upset. Texas fight. Give me Texas in an upset.
And an upset over number 1. Let's move on here. Number 22, Cincinnati is 6-1, 2-1 record in conference. A huge bounce back from last season. They get UAB at home, or they get UAB in Birmingham. The Blazers are 3-3. They haven't won in conference yet in 2 tries, but UAB knows how to keep it competitive. They're one of the feistiest teams in the conference, and surely they'll play up to whoever they meet against. Since he is favored by 17 in this game, I don't see it being that much of a difference. Give me Cincinnati though to win it. Danny?
Hey, give me Cincinnati to win close. Cincinnati is one of the best teams in the USA. I believe Cincinnati pulls off a win.
Big Bear?
Yeah, I think that line will come in during the week, but yeah, give me Cincinnati to win.
Mm-hmm. How about a surprisingly good matchup out of the ACC? Number 11, Clemson returning home. They're 6-1 and 3-0 in conference play, and they host a 5-2, 3-0 team. You would think North Carolina or a Florida State. No, this is Duke, who are talking about coming into Clemson to take on the Tigers. The Duke Blue Devils have had an impressive season, though definitely their crown jewel would be beating a top 25 team and entering the rankings. They've entered the rankings 3 times since the new millennium started. Do they enter it a 4th time with a win here? Clemson's favored by 14.5. I don't think so. I think Clemson remains on pace to keep up with the Joneses of their division, that being Virginia Tech. Give me Clemson to win this one. Danny?
Yeah, give me Clemson to win this one. It's in Death Valley. It's going to be loud. It's going to be ruckus. And I believe that's going to make it.
Pig Bear?
You already know my pick, Clemson by a million. But no, seriously, Duke could keep it close for about 3 quarters, but I think Clemson pulls away in the 4th quarter. Clemson wins in like 42-30.
Hey, keep in mind, with Clemson Duke, anything's possible.
Yeah.
You'd know. How about this?
Ball in the red zone twice.
How's about this? Louisville and Liberty meeting up. We all expected this to be a game. We never expected both these teams to have near identical records, or for Liberty to technically have the better one. Louisville's 5-2 and 2-2 overall, or 2-2 in conference. Liberty 3-1 in conference, 5-1 overall. The point spread is even here. The game's in Lynchburg, Virginia. And yeah, you could really go either way here. I'm going to pick Louisville to win this one and keep on pace with the top teams in the CUSA East. Danny?
This is the biggest home game in Liberty football program history. Liberty's off to its best start in program history. Liberty is still in the race for the CUSA East.
Is this a Liberty, Liberty, Liberty?
Yep, give me Liberty to win this.
Pig Bear?
Flames are on fire this season.
Well, with Liberty University, I would go a different direction, but that is not YouTube friendly. But let's stay on the good side of stuff. Good grace of everybody. Here, I think Liberty will get the upset over Louisville here.
Interesting, a Liberty upset. Move on to the SEC for a ranked matchup. Probably the lowest profile ranked matchup the SEC's had in a while. Number 16 LSU, pardon me, at 4-3 in conference, 1-2 overall, taking on number 14 Auburn, who is 5-1 and 2-0 in conference play. Auburn only favored by 4.5. I think I take Auburn plus the points in this game, Danny.
Yeah, give me Auburn to win this game. It's in Auburn. It's going to be a loud environment. I'm sure Auburn's going to be looking to clinch their spot in this SEC West, potentially as the champion.
Pig Bear?
Eagle, war damn Eagle. I think Auburn roll up in Atlanta.
I think Pig Bear broke up a bit, but I did hear him say Auburn in this one. I don't know why we highlighted this one, but we have a UCF game once again. Number 10 UCF, who's 6-0, taking on East Carolina. An East Carolina team who's historically struggled. The UCF Knights favored by 21 in this. Give me UCF by 1 million. Danny?
Yeah, give me UCF to win this, but I think it might be a bit closer than expected. That average game, both these teams had history being close, and UCF's had a lot of close games. I think with the bye week giving them rest, give me the UCF to win.
Pig Bear?
Not so fast. I'm kidding. East Carolina's a good program. Obviously, had a hard year, but I think UCF should win this game plus the points.
We'll move on to the first leg, no pun intended, of the Beehive Boot rivalry. Utah State is 4-2 and 1-1, having themselves a great year, taking on BYU in Provo. The Cougars are 5-1 and 1-1 in their final year at the Mountain West before they move on to the Big 12. BYU, an exciting team to watch. The Cougars are favored by 6.5 in this one. Danny, who do you have?
Give me BYU to win this. It's in Provo. I'm sure BYU's excited for this, and I think BYU will win this matchup.
Pig Bear? Pig Bear, you're breaking up.
You to win this one. Like in the Beehive Boot.
Pig Bear, I think you're breaking up, but I did hear you there. BYU on that one. We're game before game of the week. Indiana is 5-1.
All
right. BYU's 5-1. So is Indiana, who's 5-1 and 2-0. They're currently sitting in a contentious second place in the Big Ten standings. They take on Penn State, who is 7-0 and 3-0. Penn State's had a history of close games, including against Michigan and Wisconsin before them. Does Indiana keep it close this week as well? Penn State favored by Vegas by 8.5 in this one. I think Penn State gets it done and holds control of their own destiny in the Big Ten. Danny?
Give me Penn State to win this game. They're about, as I said, they are proven to be one of the best teams, and I think Penn State wins this one at home. Give me Penn State to win it.
Pig Bear?
You need Penn State to win, but Penn State wins close.
It's their favorite thing. Well, we move on to our 2KU game of the week. Now, in sports, there are a lot of rivalries that keep having historical significance. The NBA has the Boston Celtics and the LA Lakers. The MLB would have the New York Yankees and the Boston Red Sox. Look at the NFL with how many times the Cowboys and Steelers met in the 70s. Or how many times you saw the Colts and Patriots back in the 2000s. So many rivalries have huge implications on the championships of their respective sports. And in 2KU, no rivalry has been this way like Stanford and Oregon. Not who either team would consider their biggest rivals necessarily. I think Stanford lays claim to Cal or USC, and Oregon has very much the claim on Oregon State. However, if you're talking about the rival who you beat or lost to meaning the most, you could think Stanford and Oregon. Look at how much these teams have succeeded. Stanford won a crucial game against Oregon in 2010. That was their go ahead to the national championship that they won that season. He's in Oregon, of course, winning big games against Stanford in 2011 and 2012. That led to 2 straight appearances in the national championship and a 2012 championship. Oregon would do the same thing again in 2014, helped by a win over Stanford. Stanford would win the conference in 2017. Oregon would win another back-to-back in 2019 and 2020. Stanford would win over Oregon in 2021 in one of the highest profile games of that season. And Stanford and Oregon on the infamous game that wouldn't be shown, the game that would not be televised, you could say. A big win by Oregon over Stanford in Palo Alto kept the Cardinal out of the national championship and put USC into the Pac-12 championship discussion, and that led USC to beat Stanford in LA and move on to the national championship. No rivalry in the past 15 years has meant more to the history of college football than Stanford and Oregon, and another chapter will be added to that history on Saturday night. Right, that being Saturday, October 21st, as number 3 Stanford heads to Eugene to take on the number 5 Oregon Ducks. Stanford is 7-0 on the year, 4-0 in conference play. Oregon 6-1, 4-0 in conference play. Oregon just came off that big win against USC. Stanford just put 56 points up on. Stanford just put up 56 points on Arizona at home. Not even the biggest blowout they've had in conference this season. They put 79 up on Oregon State. Oregon, of course, famous for putting up a ton of points. Lest we forget that time they scored 106 points last season. This is going to be a high-scoring, high-flying affair. I'm sure the point spread is going to be insane on this one. Oregon is the favorite in this game, according to the odds. They're favored by 3.5 points. This is a very difficult decision to make. I'm going to pick the Oregon Ducks to improve to 7-1 and take control of the conference. Danny, who do you have in this game?
This team is battle-tested. They have played against several big teams, including several teams in the top 10 already, but they might have a loss. I still think they win this game. Give me the Ducks to win this.
Picking the Oregon Ducks. Take Bear, wrap us out. Who do you have?
I wanted to go Stanford, but it's in Eugene, so I gotta.
You heard it here first.
Go.
You've heard all the quacking about the games. Thank you for watching today's episode of the 2KU Weekly Podcast. Don't forget to tune in on Saturday night for Oregon Stanford. It's going to be a blast, I'm sure. And don't forget to tune in that Sunday while we discuss the rest of the games. Join the Type of Joy 101 Discord for more, linked on the channel About page. Thank you all so much for watching, and so long from the 2KU.